Welcome to Processing Purpose, a business and lifestyle podcast committed to having honest conversations about the stuff in our lives that is often suppressed, ignored, or overlooked. We are two brothers from very different backgrounds, but with one common goal. From entrepreneurship to relationships, from hobbies to house projects, nothing is off limits as we process becoming the best version of ourselves in business and life. We're back again.
We're back. I was waiting for you to do it because I thought I'd take it over every single time. But glad
Usually you sing it.
Glad to be back. We're back. Glad to be back with you in the seat. Another solid summer weekend, and it's coming to a close.
School starts tomorrow.
I'm not ready for it. I'm not even the one going back to school, and I'm not ready for it. But no, I'm excited for the kids, though. I can tell they're ready to get back to school for sure. Kind of at each other's throats a little bit, so I think it'll be good to.
Are they ready, or are we as parents ready for them to go back?
Both. Yeah, both. And school's such a good rhythm for kids, just being around other kids and other authority, listening to other adults and following directions and all that sort of thing. It just seems like, for me anyways, our household seems a little bit more fluid around school time, interestingly enough.
Well, I think it's a schedule.
Rhythm,
yeah. I think it's just a predictable rhythm day in, day out of what the morning looks like and what the afternoon and evening looks like. And
I kind of need that too. I need to get back on schedule a little bit. We both had a big summer. I mean, lots of different fun activities and running around. But I think I'm ready to get back on schedule.
Yeah, I had to take the whole weekend this weekend and I was going to say recover. I'm not sure it was recovery, but it was like, okay, I need to slow it down because we're about to hit the school rhythm, which is a busier rhythm on a day-to-day basis. You know, the summer is busy in like spurts.
Right. We don't do sports over summer yet, but we will, right? But come school time, then you're in sports activities. Yeah. So then it's not just school, it's after school, evenings, all those sorts of things.
Yeah. Just Van, I guess, had sports all summer. He was on swim team this summer.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
And that was a massive commitment. Geez, swim team.
I just listened to a podcast and they were talking about, what podcast was it? But they were talking about the best way to physically develop your child. There's 3 sports: swimming, gymnastics, and jiu-jitsu. Were the 3 that they gave, and I thought, okay, I can get on board with that and try. But if you think about the development of the body, that makes a lot of sense. Hand-eye coordination, all that stuff.
Yeah. Well, I'm starting jiu-jitsu with Van in here the fall. So.
No! Yeah. You jumped in before me. Oh, well, we're going to start next year, right? So, yeah, Luke and I had talked about that. We really both want to get into that. But my boy's too young. He's got to be at least 8 years old. So next year we'll start up. But, yeah, good for you. That's awesome. I want to start that, too. I think they have an adult beginners class right after the kids class, which is nice. So I'm sure it's going to smell like sweaty ranch in there. Ranch dressing.
That is awful. That is terrible. Why would you say that? Sweaty ranch dressing?
That's what I envision a dojo to smell like. I mean, if that's what they're even called. But man, just a bunch of sweaty, stinky kids. There you go. Ranch dressing.
I don't know how to transition from that. That is an awful. You just made someone crash their car that was listening to this.
Oh, if you thought you smell bad, try hot ranch.
Oh.
It smells awful.
Terrible. I feel like we should start this recording over just to
we're back.
Spare people.
And we're back. Okay, let's get back on track here. So what are we talking about today? What's the big topic? What's the theme?
I don't know how to...
It's big. It's a big general one.
Yeah, I don't know how you really put it into like a concise thought of it's going to be like this. It's a bit of my journey as far as like what I've tried to navigate and improve upon over the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years.
Right.
But I think it's, it'll part of this is going to be my journey through it. But part of it also is just recognizing that we're all there on some level, and it's trying to navigate our pride.
Yeah.
And how that shows up, because it shows up different for different people. And I've observed, as I become aware of it, I've observed it showing up in various forms. And really this topic came about because of something Holly said to me. Holly's my wife. Gosh, within the last 6 months. And she was observing the way I was responding to a particular situation. And she said, it's like you're trying to prove you're worthy. And the context of it all doesn't matter, but that statement stopped me cold.
Stung you.
And it was like, I had to pause and be like, interesting. I would have never phrased it that way, but proving my worth to whom, to what end, and just observing, what does that mean? Is that what's giving me drive? Is that, is it baggage that I'm bringing in from other experiences? So yeah, we can take this in a number of different directions, but kind of the premise of this is pride and humility, and operating from these places of such, and how that shows up for people and how that affects the people around you, how you're perceived through all of that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of.
Let me ask a question. Is there an underlying, it could even be unconscious or subconscious, but did you set an expectation early on in your entrepreneurship career where you said, by this point in my life, I will be here. Yeah. I expect to be here. And because maybe there's a gap still remaining, you're going, I need people to know that I might be here, but I'm going here. And I should be here, and I'm going here. Is there some of that maybe?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting observation. I'm not sure I had connected that dot, but yeah, 100%. I remember being in my early 20s and writing out on paper that, by the time I'm 30, I will have XYZ. I will have made, this type of impact. I will, and I was very materialistic, as most early 20-year-olds are.
And you probably accomplished most of it, by the way.
I'd have to go back and look at the list.
I'll bet you did.
But it was like, I'm going to have a house here, here, and here.
Sure.
I'm going to drive this type of car. I'm going to have this much time off. I'm going to have, and I wrote all these things out. And yeah, on some level, I've accomplished certainly some of those things.
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe it was a delta between where I thought I could be. Should's a dangerous word to say. That's probably a whole nother podcast episode is, stop shoulding on yourself. But yeah, I think that there's a gap between where I thought I would be and where I am.
How would you like to present yourself? Talking about, kind of being stung a little bit, being called out a little bit. Like when you think about it and when you see it, envision it, how would you like to present yourself? How would you like the world to see you or meet you and greet you?
Yeah. I had an experience, and I've had this experience before, but it just recently connected dots for me. And I was with a buddy that came to visit me in town that hadn't come to town before. And
which was really cool. He really went out of his way to make that stop, which was really nice.
Yeah, it wasn't by any means
convenient.
No, lives on the other side of the country. And so he showed up, and we went out with some friends. I wanted to introduce him to some of my friends here in town, and so we went out, and we were all talking about what we did for a living. Normal get to know you talk, right? And he was asked what he did for a living, and he almost played a little small. He said, yeah, I sell protein vitamins online. And it's 100% true.
Right. But you knew it was a downplay.
But it was playing small. I mean, he crushes it. He has one of the largest CPG companies, up and coming, growing CPG companies in the country.
And he's the CEO?
Yeah, he's the co-CEO and COO of it.
Wow.
And so, I observed it and watched it, and it's not the first time I've seen him do that. I've been friends with him for, a couple decades now.
Yeah.
And I've watched him as he's done other projects introduce himself similarly in ways that's like, oh, that was interesting. You know, you when you see it at first, you don't connect the dots. You just go, oh, that's an interesting way to introduce yourself. Like I didn't see that, or to explain what you do. Very contrary to the way I do it. And I find myself, you know, if someone asks me what I do, there's almost this sense of, let me tell you how big I am.
Sure.
And, you know, I will throw words, drop names, insert numbers or size, scope, you know, money, to make it feel, I'm not sure I'm making it feel bigger than it is, but I want you to feel the full scope of how big it is. And it's just a very different headspace between, you know, I don't know if it's humility that would make you do it one way versus the other, and pride that would make you do it the other way. But it's just in my own observation of my heart in it. I'm definitely trying to be something bigger. I'm trying to prove something to that person. Like, you should respect me. Let me tell you how big I am.
And yeah, and I understand that, and we talked about it briefly before, but I think a lot of people actually are there. I think a lot of people want others around them to be impressed with either what they're currently doing or what they're going to do. Do you feel like, and mine's the latter, yours might be the former, but mine's the latter. I want you to know what I'm going to do, right? This is what I'm working on, right? You might not be impressed with what I'm doing now, but I'm working on something, right? So you'll always hear me talk about those types of things. You've heard it for a decade, right? So that's how I try to impress is, man, I got this going, but really listen to
But that's not what I'm really excited about.
This is what I'm really working toward. Yeah. So a little bit of that comes out. But do you feel like maybe in not just Devin, but others in leadership and very successful in their leadership are maybe propped up a whole lot more? A good example is, this is a weird example. Maybe I shouldn't use this, but I'm going to. So I was in a human
As long as we're not talking about, you know, ranch and that whole thing.
Oh, this gets even weirder. So you're welcome, listeners. So I was in a human sexuality class in college. There was a BDSM panel that came in. There was a gal that owned a BDSM clinic, bondage, domination, whatever, you know, the whole thing, sadomasochism, whatever. But she explained that her number one clients, and by all means, I'm not directing this toward Devin. This is not Devin. This is somebody else completely. But she said the number one clients were executives, were CEOs, CMOs, whatever you name it, because they were always in a position of power. They always were in authority. They always got to make the decisions, and they came there to get balance in their life. And so it makes me wonder, you know, is socially, are some people so propped up that they feel like they have to balance it with downplaying, right? With like, I don't want everyone in my world to see me as this big giant leader, because everyone feels that way already. In a great quote by Robin, our friend Robin, she said, I think somebody else said this, but she shared it with me. Keep working until you no longer have to introduce yourself. And I think he's there, right? I think he's at that point where but you've seen this in the past too. So maybe this is just a part of his ethos and how he operates. But it does make me wonder if people in that are great leaders and doing well, if they just get so many accolades already, they don't need more.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know either. I mean, I think there's also edification of somebody is way more powerful than self-edification.
Big time.
So, you know, I felt like he was playing a little small, and so of course I interjected and was like,
"Come on,
he's downplaying it. Like, he crushes it." And so that, I'm sure, is way more powerful than him posturing like he's crushing it. And maybe that is part of just like, I know people will do this, or if I play small enough, people will, you know, maybe it's
dig in a little bit more.
Maybe it's a reverse psychology way of doing it.
But it works.
It works 100%. And really for me, it was just an observing of it and going, you know, I know that I'm am I humble enough to do that? Even if it works.
Right.
Am I humble enough to risk somebody else not doing that to prop me up?
Right.
In an effort to be small. Am I
Right.
okay with, is my ego okay with that?
Yeah.
And it was an observation of that because I just, even in weeks previously, I had introduced myself. I had met somebody at the pool here at the local pool, and we both know him. We've talked about it before, but I introduced myself, and I found myself not saying things that weren't true, but introducing myself and talking about what I was doing. And I was almost going, easy, you're not as big deal as I am. And while those words weren't coming out of my mouth, those were the kind of heart thoughts that I had had. And I was like, man, it's so unattractive if it can be perceived at all that that's the way it's coming across. And even if it can't, like, that's not how I want to show up.
Internally, you're actually like, you just feel like a mean person. Like you just feel mean.
Yeah,
And
you
it just
feel
doesn't
like,
feel good.
I can do way better than this.
Yeah.
I can be kinder. I can be more interested in you. I can encourage you more. I can talk about how great you're doing.
And you can learn from everyone.
And
There's
it
always
doesn't
something
take
to
a
learn.
thing away from me.
No.
And yet, it's not my default yet.
Right.
I recognized. And I'm like, there's something here. There's, ironically, the same buddy that, we're talking about here that came in and introduced himself that way and is playing small is the same buddy that called me out 5-6 years ago and said, you're the most prideful person I know, which we've talked about in this podcast before.
I wouldn't be surprised though if he went through his own pride journey himself. I wouldn't be surprised by that.
Very possibly.
If we heard him go, you know what? I had those same issues, and it took a lot of self-awareness, and change, and maybe not, but maybe.
I have intentionally had to effort. Once that happened, where Devin called me out and said, look, you're the most prideful person I know. I, since that point, have intentionally, consciously efforted to say, I don't know.
Mm.
And that wasn't my default before. My default was not that I'm going to BS you, because I don't believe that I fabricated a story to make it seem like I knew, but I always played into it that there was part of this that I knew, and that of course.
Yeah. But you got to be careful too, because you say I don't know too frequently, or maybe even haphazardly or harsh. It comes across as disinterest.
Sure.
Comes across as like, I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
It's like, whoa, hold on. This person's interested. They want to talk to you about it, And sometimes
Yeah.
it's just opening up going, I don't know. What do you know about it?
Well,
those sort of
100%.
things. Yeah.
It's not just I don't know.
Yeah.
Right?
Get out of here.
I don't know. It's very dismissive. It's not the dismissive I don't know. It's like I have no idea. Like,
Yeah.
that's a good question.
Yeah.
Where'd you come up with that question? Right?
Right.
It's being inquisitive. It's being willing to be seen as uninformed.
Right.
And that's a bit of a vulnerable spot for me,
Yeah.
as to be seen as uninformed. Like, I kind of pride myself in knowing a lot about a lot of different things, and I've had to effort to be like, yeah, I don't know about that. Tell me about that. Whether that's,
Now, do you actually don't know, or you know and you're like, I don't want to come across as knowing everything?
no, if I believe I have valuable information to contribute to the conversation, I don't hesitate to share.
Yeah. Okay.
But before, I would either posture like I knew, or say something with so much authority that they wouldn't question that it was the truth.
Right.
When, I heard somebody else say this, and so I think it's true, but I don't really know it's true. But I'm going to say like it is true.
Yeah.
I've done that a lot.
Yeah.
And
you say it fast, say it confident. People think you're right.
That's right.
It's scary, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. And that would have been my default.
Yeah.
And so not being, no one likes to know it all. And
Ever.
Ever.
Yeah, or a contrarian, but that's another subject.
Yeah, and someone that's always arguing.
Yeah,
That's
it's like,
obnoxious,
oh,
too.
that's a good point, but I have a better point. And you're like, get out of here.
Yeah, yeah. There's a time and a place, but sparingly.
Yeah.
Sparingly.
Yeah, on a debate stage is when it's appropriate. Other than that, shut it.
Yeah,
You know?
totally. So yeah, I've had to effort and create this arc where I'm coming off of and coming back from, like, trying to project that I am bigger, better, smarter, faster, more informed than the person I'm talking to. And you said something there that was great, is that you can learn something from everybody. And that's not a belief that I held.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah.
It's been learned. It's been something that I've had to go, is that really true? Do I really believe that I could learn something from everybody? And then efforting to go, okay, well, what, if that is true, how do I ask? How do I show up? How do I communicate? How do I respond humbly while still believing that I have a lot of value to bring? It's just an interesting thread to draw in there. Do you navigate any of that stuff? You always strike me as a very, like, down to earth, humble. I don't see you swing your pride around or try and project something that you're not. Like, what does this journey look like for you?
Yeah, and I think a lot of it has to do with my journey and kind of some things I've been through, and people I've lived around, right? I lived in the shelter, and so I lived around dudes that were coming off and on the street, and so when you're in that environment for a year and a half, and you're talking to all these individuals who are literally seen as the scum of the earth by the rest of society, and you're learning things left and right from them, you believe it pretty quickly that, man, everyone's got something to give. And wildly enough, the scum of the earth are some of the smartest, incredible human beings I've ever met in my life. They just had some pretty crappy circumstances throughout their life that led them to that one reason or another. Now, there's some, decision making in there that they own, and we all have to own. But anyway, so, living in those scenarios, I think you're forced into it, right? You don't have an option. Either you open your mind to that or not, and you become a hermit. And so, and the other thing too is, I do have the gift of gab. I've always been able to talk to anyone, anywhere, anytime, to draw things out of people. And what I notice is, with all those conversations and questioning, I just found way more relatability than I did differences to everybody in every corner of the earth. Like, not to say the racial reconciliation in our country right now is not relevant and necessary. It's just, I don't know. I haven't seen the world that way personally. I've seen it. I've seen way more likeness in one of us than differences throughout my entire life. And so, don't get me wrong. There's still people that, I turn an eye to or kind of go, what the heck was that about? But for the most part, those are outliers. For the most part, we're really alike. We're really similar to one another, whether we're at different stages in life or different success, throughout our life. We're all very, very similar. And it's wild. Like, have you ever heard 7 Degrees Kevin Bacon or 6 Degrees of Separation or whatever it is? Sure. It's so true. I mean, I'm not kidding, within 2 to 3 questions, I can make a connection to somebody. It's wild, and how's and what's help, right? We've talked about that before. Open-ended questions so people can really... And, I actually learned this from Mr. Rogers. So wild. I actually love that man dearly. Rest in peace. But he said, if you let the silence do the heavy lifting in conversation, he goes, you will be shocked at how much people will share with you. Right? And just allowing that conversation to unfold. And so, I don't know. I find a connectedness with humans and people. I really need social interaction. I was watching a Lex Friedman podcast, and can't remember the guy's name, but he's a big adventurer, somewhat relevant, but he was a big adventurer and he almost died. He was very close to death, almost killed by uncontacted tribes people. And he said the moment they realized they were going to get out of it, the first thing he thought of was, I want a hug. Like I just want somebody to hold me, you know? And I bring that up because I think it's the connectedness with all of us is so deep and so real that because of the digital world and age that we're in, we're losing that. We're losing that connectedness a little bit. I think there's this false idea that somehow we're staying more connected because of the web. And I think the physical interactions with one another are so important. So through all of those experiences, I don't know. And you know it, I try to find the best in people because I think it's there. I know it's there. Even the worst of the worst, it's there. It's somewhere in there. We got to get it out.
What would you say, or how would you encourage someone to make a transition from, more of a self-focused conversationalist to others-focused conversationalist? How do you make that leap? How do you make that transition?
I mean, I kind of alluded to it just a moment ago, but asking questions, I think that's first and foremost. You can't talk about yourself when you're asking questions, right? And you can't listen if you're talking about yourself. You can't learn if you're talking about yourself. So I'd say always start. Here's a real tip. You want charisma? This is from a pastor. If you want charisma, spend all of your time making other people feel great about who they are, less time making them feel great about who you are. That's the difference. Make them feel great about who they are. I always, usually if I meet somebody for the first time, I start with a compliment right away. I don't even waste time.
You do. I've noticed.
Like, God, I love those shoes. They're great shoes on you. Good color. And immediately they're like, okay, yeah, let's talk, right? And I've even fine-tuned my greetings to howdy. I'm not kidding. I say howdy to everybody because it elicits a really positive response. People look at you like, hi. Like,
who says that?
Yeah, howdy, what? Where am I? And people really enjoy that. You immediately get a positive response to that. When you say hi, you get sometimes a meh, meh, meh. Howdy always gets a good one. So when you create this positive flow right from the get-go, it just lends itself to really positive conversation, you know? And then immediately people want to learn about you because who is this guy that just walked in and made me feel great?
Yeah.
I want to know who that guy is. Of course. We'll talk about that later. But let's talk about you.
Yeah, I mean, if you make someone feel great about themselves, all they think about is how great you are for making them feel great about themselves.
Correct. I remember a good friend of mine, Brian, I was talking to him about the same thing. And there's a book written on this in the 40s, right? I can't, who wrote that?
How to
influence people.
How to win friends and influence people.
Right. That's in that book. You want to learn how to do that well, read that book for sure. But I was talking to him about all this and he goes, man, that makes me realize I was talking to a guy at a baseball game and I walked away from the conversation feeling like that was the best conversation I've had for a long time. But then after you just said that, I realized it's because I was talking about myself the whole time.
Sure.
And that's what happens when people get to tell you about themselves, you actually become the shiny object. It's weird. I'm not sure how that works, but it does.
Man, that was a master class right there.
Yeah, really. But read that book. I mean, he spells it out, and that was written decades ago. Still relevant.
Yeah,
as relevant as it ever was.
Yeah, I try and go through that book. I effort towards once a year. That's not fair, but that's what I try and get through that book because I am an introvert by nature. I'm fine not being around people and not having. It just doesn't give me energy.
Yeah.
And so.
Does it drain you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's classic introvert. Yeah.
It's a performance.
Yep. But extroverts are the same in that if they're alone, they wither and die.
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely. And for me, it's just it's work. To be in a group of people, it's work. And to try and elevate somebody else has been an effort.
Yeah.
Which if you're listening and I've done that to you, I'm so sorry. Like I'm trying to improve and trying to get better.
Processing purpose.
Yeah. And trying to bury my pride and understand what makes people tick and be a more likable person. And
what's healthy pride? What does healthy pride look like? Because I don't think all pride is bad. I think if it's arrogant pride, it is, but I think there's good pride to feel proud of yourself and your family and what you built and accomplished, and I think there's a healthy way to do it.
I think it's just general observation. I think it's internal versus external.
Sure. Outward versus inward.
Yeah, I think it's feeling good about what you've done, what you've accomplished, where you're going. It's self-worth versus you trying to get your worth from someone else's adoration about how great you are.
Right.
And I think that's the difference is like, yeah, like I don't need you to confirm that I'm doing things well.
Yeah.
I know I'm doing things well.
Yeah.
But if I need you to reinforce, to tell me that I'm crushing it, to tell me that I've got great kids, I've got a great marriage, that I have a beautiful house, that I have a great car, that if I need that, that's the difference.
Yeah.
That's the difference.
That's a great point.
And I think on some level I still need those things. And I'm breaking through those things. Being aware of it, we talk about that a lot on this podcast. Being aware of it.
But I think affirmations in some ways are confirmation. For me, they are, right? When people are saying, hey, man, I'm noticing this, man. You're really doing great, right? Like, whoa, look what you've accomplished. Like, yes, okay, it can seep in and go, yeah, look at me. But at the same time, like, someone saying things are going well, it's confirmation, right? Because we're always spinning in circles, wondering if we're doing the right thing, right? We've had that conversation in podcasts. Mm-hmm. We've had themes around this, right? Am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing every single day? So yeah, I think it can get dangerous, but I think sometimes they're important too.
But is it just coming naturally, or are you trying to create it?
Right. Or
I think that's the difference.
Can you not function without it? Yeah.
I think that's the difference. And if you're trying to project, the classic is, buying a car you can't afford to impress the people you don't like.
Right.
Right? It's buying that BMW so that your neighbor thinks that you're doing better than you really are. Right. That's the difference.
Right.
It's
rather than buying because you truly love that car and you enjoy driving it and that sort of thing.
Yeah. And only the heart part of that,
sure.
that piece. But I think that's the difference. There's nothing wrong with the gratitude or the feeling of like, I have accomplished that. Thanks for noticing. I appreciate that. Versus, let me tell you how great I'm doing just so that you tell me and get it back to me about how great I'm doing.
It's almost like we're projecting our legacy. It's almost like we're foreshadowing into the future, right? Like, this is what my legacy is going to be. It's like, as a saying, I had a guy brag about all the money he used to make. And I'm like, no one's impressed by what you used to make, right? Mm-hmm. So no one's going to be impressed by what we used to do. We're almost projecting, hey, this is what I'm doing so you can, feel good about what I'm up to. What do you want your stamp to be on the world? Like, when you really look at that, if we truly are projecting our legacy, what do we actually want that legacy to look like? If we were to look back instead of forward.
Yeah. I'd like to say that I have this like 1 sentence, 2 sentence, 3 sentences of like, this is what I want my legacy to be. But for me to articulate it, it's still a bit abstract. I want to leave the world in a place that's better than when I came into it. I want my kids to have advantages that I didn't have. I want my neighbors to feel like they're downgrading when someone moves into my house after I leave it.
You want to be known. You want to be a positive influence in your life and everyone's around you. Mm-hmm. Is what I hear.
Yeah.
And you are. I hope you know that. You're really positive influence for a lot of people. See
how I fabricated that to get you to say that?
You're already becoming a better version of yourself. Look at that. No, it's true. But I love that. And I was going to say something similar. Honestly, my legacy, I want it to be a great husband, a great father, and a great friend.
Yeah. You know how I answered that a decade ago, though?
What?
I want a book to be written about me.
Sure.
I want to do something great enough that someone writes a book about it.
I mean, but look at that evolution over 10 years, 12 years, 15 years.
I don't think, to be honest, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But if that's, your driving motivation of like, yeah, I
want to be remembered.
I want to be remembered.
Yeah.
And I think we all want to be remembered, right? I don't think there's anything wrong with that either. Like, gosh, I'd love for 2, 3, 4 generations from now that they talk about great Uncle Luke. Like, I think that's okay.
Sure.
Like, there's nothing wrong with that. But if that's like the thing that drives you forward, like, might want to consider.
It's got a tone.
Priorities.
It has a tone to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has a, I want the world to know about me kind of a thing. Instead of, I think for me personally, I think a more healthy way to perceive it is I want the world to remember not just the love I gave, but my expression, and how much I put my heart and soul into what I did, right? Like,
Yeah.
Like less about the accomplishment and more about how I went about it, I think would be more important to me, or means more to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so we've talked a little bit about my brother-in-law, Chris, who was murdered a couple years ago. And, he had, when we did his memorial service in Omaha, they had to rent an arena.
It's like 6,000 people or something.
Yeah, there's 2,000 people there.
Wow.
And I mean, that's the largest memorial service I've ever been to.
Yeah.
For a mid-30s, director of baseball operations, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, wait, what was going on there? Like, that doesn't just happen.
Right.
Because you have a good name. It doesn't just happen because you coached a team.
For people to actually show up, you had to make an impact on their life.
You had to make an impact. And the amount of people that I talked to that said, man, Chris was my best friend. And I don't mean 1 or 2. I mean most. He made most people feel like they were his best friend.
Huh.
And that is mind-blowing, because I have a hard time making my best friends feel like they're my best friends. And he did it for an arena full of people. I didn't talk to 2,000 people, but I talked to enough people to go, interesting.
Sounds like he figured out how to make other people feel great about who they are.
Yeah. He was on their team and a cheerleader for them. And as excited or more excited for their wins than they were.
Yeah.
And that endears people to you.
Who doesn't love a cheerleader?
Right?
Who doesn't love a cheerleader? Everyone loves a cheerleader.
Yeah. So this is, a bit of what I've been realizing now. There's just an element of the way I present myself to the world and the way I interact with people. Hopefully it's not perceived on the outside when I introduce myself to you or tell you about what I've got going on, but I see it on the inside.
How do you handle criticism? Because that certainly is a pride topic.
Yeah.
I had a bit of a gut punch a few days ago, and it was like but to your point of Devin calling you out on pride, unfortunately, everybody listening, it takes really uncomfortable circumstances to change. It takes pain. It takes some hurt to change. And so I'll share mine in a bit. But how do you deal with criticism?
I mean, first and foremost, you got to consider the source.
Sure.
Right? So the source of that criticism determines a lot of the response. Hugely. If the criticism comes from, a tweet that somebody says about me, right? Or a review that we received on one of our rentals, or right? I mean, it's different than my son coming to me and saying, "Hey, can I tell you something? Like, I feel like you're not giving me the attention that I'd like to have." That would crush me.
Yeah.
Right? So source first and foremost.
Sure.
Secondly, listen. Regardless of whether you agree or not, that is their reality for that moment.
Yeah.
And so Their perception is their reality, regardless of whether you agree or it's right or wrong. Listen. And then measure your response.
Sure.
You know, you may have more information. You may have made that decision or took that action based on information that they don't have.
Right.
That doesn't mean their perception is wrong. Their perception is their reality.
It's just incomplete.
It's just incomplete.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily your responsibility also to be like, well, let me set you straight. But you have to look at how you're going to respond and how you take the next action. I saw a fantastic, I think I forwarded this to you. I saw a fantastic meme. It was like an Instagram reel or something like that. And they were comparing blame versus responsibility. And I'll paraphrase this, but a person was asked who had cancer sitting in an audience, you know, whether they wanted 100% of the responsibility. And
of having cancer?
Yeah.
Oh.
And the person got offended and said, this is not my fault. I did not give myself cancer. I did not choose this path. How dare you? And he goes, wait a second. I did not say whether or not you wanted the blame. I said, do you want the responsibility? You have the ability to respond, and you choose that response.
Right. You chose blame. I didn't say anything about
I didn't say anything about blame. I said responsibility. And the person paused and said, well, then I want 100% of the ability to respond. We have 100% of the ability to respond. Just because you get criticism doesn't mean you're being blamed.
Right.
Maybe it does, but it doesn't necessarily mean. But you have 100% of the responsibility.
Right.
You get to choose how you respond to that. And part of that is looking internally and going, is there truth to this?
Right.
If so, how much? If not, let it go.
And I'd argue too, not only the source, but the emotion of the source too, right? When someone's lit up and upset and angry about something else and they turn to you and just go off on something, be careful. Like, it hurts, but be careful not to take that so personally, because I'm going to take it a lot more personally when someone's calm, looking me in the eye and addressing me with criticism rather than spouting at me because they're upset about something else. Right. So be careful there too. A lot of people do that. And I'm guilty too, where someone's upset in the room. They maybe direct something at you and you're like, God, dude, and you just feel horrible the rest of the day. You feel like, what did I do? Now and you see them run off and they're not even thinking about you at all. They could care less what you're going to do with the rest of the day, but now your day is ruined. Yeah. Be so careful not to take that as sheer criticism. That's a moment.
Be a thermostat, not a thermometer.
Write it down. That's great.
Right? You determine the temperature of the conversation. You don't reflect the temperature of the conversation.
That's so good.
You get to decide how you engage and how you respond. You get the responsibility.
And I'll share my experience. I actually am really proud of how I responded. I didn't overreact. I didn't say anything hasty or that I regret. But I had a moment where a friend looked at me and said, man, you're so great. And there's truth to this. This is why it stung. So I'm going to be very vulnerable and say, I accept this as truth, but it definitely, I feel change happening within me because of this comment. So maybe it was divine intervention, but I can't lie and say it didn't hurt. She said, man, you come up with great ideas, but execution, damn it. And I just sat there and I thought, and this is when I was sharing, I've got things rolling with Lucky Lou. Things are happening already. So execution's slow, but it is in motion. And I am doing things I need to do, getting my food costs down. Anyway, she doesn't know all of these things. Right. Who said it. So it's within context. But it certainly punched me in the gut. It was like, wow, is that how I'm perceived? Am I perceived as a person that drums up ideas but can't get anything done? That is not how I want the world to see me.
Sure.
Well, and then, and why I did not react in that situation, because I'm sitting there in my new outdoor kitchen going, I've executed on all this. Like, this exists right here because I executed, And so I just thought, I'm seeing myself get prideful. I'm seeing myself elevate, and I'm going, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. That's her perception. She can have that perception. It shouldn't change anything about my day. Shouldn't change anything about how I take the next step forward, because this is my journey, my trajectory. How she sees it is irrelevant to how I'm planning it.
Yeah.
So, but it hurt.
Yeah.
It was a sting. It was a sting for sure. So just be careful. Like you said, be a thermostat. Don't overreact in those scenarios.
Yeah. Don't make it worse than it needs to be.
Right.
But what has been your internal response to that? So your external response was, and internal maybe was to get a little defensive. But now that you've come off of that moment and the heat of like receiving that, because when you receive those things, it whacks you.
Yeah.
Like, it causes you to go,
whoa,
I didn't.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. And you have a picture in your mind of how you want the world to perceive you. And when it's changed at all, you're like, ew. So my internal response is actually, I'm really proud. It's actually been pretty mature. It hasn't been like, I would say 5 years ago, my wheels would be spinning. I'd be having 34 dialogues with that individual about why they were wrong, why they should see it differently, all those sorts of things.
Sure.
Never happened. Hasn't happened.
Yeah.
My response has been, I need to execute. That's it. That I just need to keep taking these next steps. Now, it may play out slower than some people want it to or see it. I had a good conversation with Brooke about this the other day, that I'm slow burning this. We have a real estate business to maintain and manage. I want to keep that going, and I want to make this profitable as we go, so you can see it can work for us and our family. And so she's accepted that. That was a great, healthy conversation. We hadn't had that up to this point. So again, I share that because nobody else needs to know that. It doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
It'll play out how it plays out the way it needs to for our family and for me personally. So I am executing. It's just maybe not as fast or as efficient as maybe some people want it to be. But that's not up to them. That's up to me. So I feel fairly mature in my response to that.
Did the source of, and I don't know who that person was, but did the person that say that to you, would it have been perceived different if it come from somebody else, or did it have anything to do with the person that said it?
I think my response had something to do with the person that said it. One, because they're a wonderful, endearing, great friend of ours. And I know that they shoot from the hip from time to time. And, they've said stuff to my wife that's made her cry in the past. And they had hard conversations about that. So going back to the 4 agreements, right? Try not to take it personally.
Yeah.
Right? It's not a personal thing. Maybe she was having a day. Who knows? Doesn't matter. But point is all I need to do is set the temperature.
Yeah.
Right? And just go, no, it's not going to affect me. I'm still working on it. I got things in motion.
Yeah.
You don't know that. That's okay. You don't need to know that.
Yeah. And use it to make a shift if you need to make a shift.
It's certainly put a little fire in my belly. It's helped, not in a way of like, oh, I feel less than. It makes me feel like if that's how I'm perceived, I want to be perceived as a better executor.
Yeah.
Yeah. So hopefully this season, this next 5 years, there's a shift in me that goes from idea guy to executor, and it's very obvious. But that's going to take some transition for me, for sure.
And it might mean, and this might lead into a future podcast, that you need a partner.
Maybe. Yeah. Yeah, for this venture, thanks to you and your encouragement to go find somebody that essentially is not necessarily the opposite of me, but that has those skill sets that I do not possess.
Yeah.
But working in the same room as an individual like that, it's so life-giving, it's life-changing, and it opens your world to new ideas. So yes, to answer your question, and I see that person, sometimes when I think about growing another business, but that type of person is really, for me, it makes sense, right? It makes sense. And we talked about it briefly. I really come from a team environment. So having a team built around me is really, I think, could be really beneficial. Yeah, good point. Who knows? We'll see where it goes.
Well, and good on you for responding in a good way to those things, because those can be, I know for me, when they've happened in my life, they forever change me. Mm-hmm. And I suppose it depends on the scope and the source and all of that. You can either get bitter or get better. Yeah,
that's true. Yeah. And so back to the old saying, you can't mold clay without friction.
Yeah.
If you want to change, it's going to be uncomfortable. And sometimes people help jumpstart that for you. But I think criticism, unfortunately, is extremely necessary for growth.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks for coming along as I process this, because this has been kind of a new sort of awareness, maybe maybe an evolution of the awareness, of kind of how I've gone from being called out on my pride to recognizing I'm a know-it-all to, something we didn't even really touch on is being teachable, right?
Sure.
Being humble enough to like take direction, apply the direction, have mentorship, listen to mentorship even when you don't agree. Mentorship isn't mentorship until you disagree.
Right.
And evolve now into the way I'm presenting myself to others and seeing that, I'm improving over here with this needle, but now I'm starting to see it show up over here. This is a new area of awareness for me. So
one thought I had, and I'll just throw it out there, is it may be a balance of leading and following, meaning there's certain areas of our life we lead, there's certain areas of our life that we follow, and there's a few key players in my life that only lead, and you're one of them. There's no following anywhere. You only lead. And so it might be a matter of finding a way to follow somewhere, right? Just getting into a lane where you go, I'm not the leader here, and I'm going to follow, and I'm just going to be a part of this.
I mean, I've heard, John Maxwell says it. The best leaders are the best followers.
How do you know how to find the right followers if you don't know
what a follower looks like?
Exactly. And how they should function and what they're thinking about, right? Like, being a great leader is understanding who's following you and what they're wanting out of you, the leader, and what you need out of them. Like, without understanding that part of it, it's hard to lead well.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you hearing me out. I know that the direction of this conversation was a bit abstract and kind of spurred on by like, hey, this is kind of what I'm processing. Like, should we talk through this? Like,
of course we should. That's what the point of this is.
So thanks. And hopefully our line of thought through this, my line of thought was easy enough to follow and didn't feel too like random. It's always interesting going back and re-listening to these after we record them.
Well, and it's so cool to watch your journey unfold too, because I've watched a serious transition happen maybe since that moment Devin said it.
Sure.
Where you're constantly reflecting on these things and becoming more and more aware of your surroundings and what's happening within you and externally and everything else. And so, awareness is a gift, just understanding who you are, what you want to become. And so I guess I just want to share with our listeners that he sounds like he's struggling with pride right now, but he's actually so humble today. You are
certainly compared to where I was.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of like you had mentioned, like I want a book written about me, right? That sets a tone of like, that's who I expected myself to become then.
Yeah.
But now you're just becoming a real holistic version of yourself. And it's really cool to see it happen and watch it unfold. And it's beautiful.
Well, thank you. And thanks for being a great example of, loving on people and making people feel good about themselves. And it's always great to watch you interact and communicate with others, and you're very gifted at it. And so you've been instrumental for me as well.
We all can learn from one another. We really can.
Something from everybody.
We really can. Well, thanks guys. It's been a great topic. It's been awesome.
Cool.
Thanks
everybody.
Thank you for tuning in to Processing Purpose. We hope you grabbed a few gold nuggets to take one step forward in your journey of life and business. Please remember to like and subscribe our channel if you'd like to get more content to help you build and grow everything around you. Make today your best day. Today is day one.